You're listening to the Skylight Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening. Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to the Skylight Books podcast. I'm your host, Natalie, and today we are so excited to welcome Golden Collier to talk about their work and the Diasporan Savant Press. Golden Collier is a Chicago-based radical facilitator and multidisciplinary artist with work and collection at the Getty Museum Research Institute, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Pratt Institute, New York University's Tamiment and Wagner Labor Archives. He is a filmmaker with work currently in festival circuits around the world, including Melbourne Queer Film Festival, Outfest LA, Seattle Queer Film Festival, and more. He creates strengths-based intersectional healing and recovery reflection tools through Diasporan Savant Press and Black Queer Trans Recovery, and is the founder of the Black Non-Binary Archive, an Allied Media-sponsored oral history project. They love dancing, writing letters, gardening, wheel throwing, keeping bees, and learning, connecting all kinds of new skills in their spare time. Thanks so much for being here with us, Golden.
Thanks for inviting me.
So we have a bunch of your work in our arts annex, and our buyer Alex originally showed them to me and was like, this stuff is super cool. You need to take a look at it and see it. And so I spent like a month reading through a bunch of your zines, and they are super fucking cool. So you are a multidisciplinary artist, but with zines specifically, I wanted to start by asking you when you made your first zine. When did you realize zines were like a really cool way to put work out into the world?
Not until relatively recently, I guess. I feel like from growing up in my days, in like the hardcore and punk scene, I actually had a lot of not doubts, how about that, and apprehensions, and also kind of not ill will, but I just didn't really consider zines even legitimate, if I'm honest. Because I felt like I had all these associations built in with the hardcore scene and the white supremacy of the hardcore scene and the hypermasculinity of the hardcore scene. And that's when I first got introduced to zines. It was really a lot of that. Just kind of white anarcho-syndicalists, talking about like coffee and cats, and it just was not appealing to me at all. And I really thought the mode itself, I remember thinking, who the hell is still writing zines? It's fucking like 20, it's the millennium, what are people still writing paper zines? And I had that kind of idea about things until when I was 30, I moved to California, just to like get sober and have some distance from some things that had happened where I am from in Atlanta. And when I got out there, I went just out of curiosity to San Francisco Zine Fest. And that experience, I'm linked up with AV Jetta, who runs Open Crates and also is an organizer for SF Zine Fest, or used to be, and is a comics artist who I really admire. And I didn't know her at the time, but I remember seeing her work, and then just really, that was the first time I ever interacted with zines where I was like, oh, people are doing a lot of different kinds of things. I hadn't been exposed to the breadth of the way people were working with things. And then the next year after that, I thought I'm going to do this when it comes back up. And so I actually went and applied and got in. And I applied with like a bunch of fake zines. Like I just made the covers up, and then the inside was blank. It looked like it was a book. But I was like, well, this way it's, if I get in, then I have to make the zines. And I got in. And then I made it, and I was just like, zines were it was not what I thought it was. And if anything, I really, as someone who's like a book lover myself, it was really intoxicating to think about being able to say whatever I wanted without needing to kind of go through these like traditional publishing channels. And then I just really felt like the fests themselves, which I missed so much during the pandemic, were such a vibe themselves. Like just the most idiosyncratic, autodidactic, strange. I remember there was this one person I met that day who had been making she made zines that were like about desserts that you like with recipes you could make them, but they were all disgusting looking. Like they were shaped like birds with little eyeballs on them and smiling. I was like, people are just doing whatever the hell they want to do, you know? Um, and I love that. I love that. It just felt really good. And so it all kind of started there. And from there, I just started kind of making more zines and meeting more people. And it was a really amazing way to like, I never, if you had told me when I was in my 20s that zines would be the way that my art was in like the Met or the get, it's like ridiculous, honestly,
Mhm.
to think about, but it's true. It's introduced me to so many people. I never would have thought that, but that's how I really got started.
And then when did you sort of realize that it was a thing that deserved its own press? You're like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna keep making these, and I want to sort of put myself under a label that people will know they're mine, and I'm gonna continue to create a body of work this way."
I think when I first applied to SF Zine Fest, I had those, like I said, those dummy zines, for lack of a better word, that I just had made up what I was, what they're about. But I guess the concept was strong, so they were like, "Yeah, you're good." But then after that, I just needed a very distinct way and like succinct way to be able to apply to Fest. And I could do it as an
Mhm.
individual, but it's just easier if you're a press. And
Yeah.
I also felt myself like I felt like I was operating in a tradition of feminist presses in general throughout history that like Firebrand Press is the one who published Sister Outsider, and like Kitchen Table Press produced
Mhm.
some of all the women are white, all the men are black, but some of us are brave. I mean, it takes those independent presses doing things like that, and so I definitely felt also, in addition to it being practical, just the call to kind of move in this like lineage of like radical presses, radical small presses.
And a lot of times zines can, either sort of be like a specific moment in time. So for instance, let me get the title right. It was one of my favorites, Making Your Mark. So it can be like a specific sort of project, and that one could also be built on as well. But how did certain projects evolve where you knew you wanted to continue them or revisit them? So, for instance, your And Now My Watch Begins, which is a zine chronicling your sobriety through its initial stages in the first 7 years. And then you're like, oh, a pandemic happened and this changed the game a little bit. So, continuing to go back to that. And then also with the, let's see, the Black non-binary folks in our own words, that project that also became associated with the Allied Media Project, and how those things kind of grew from being maybe a seed of an idea, and then you just realize that there are so many people and more ways to tell these stories, and how you kind of decide which ones are done and which ones you want to either revisit or continue building.
So and now I'm watching against. Well, first of all, I was a huge Game of Thrones nerd, representing House Tyrell very strongly. But that that scene initially just came out of like a lot of frustration of being like a person that was in recovery and being like, damn, everything is based around 12 step, everything, and I had a lot of real problems with the way that I after engaging with 12 step for I think 5 or 6 years by the time I wrote the first one, I really thought I'm not trying to say nobody should do this. I'm trying to say that it's not for me for these particular reasons, and I hope that's validating for someone else who it's not for or it doesn't work for.
Mhm.
It doesn't, because it's not like if it doesn't work for you that you are doomed, and that's kind of the messaging I was getting a lot. So that one just
Yeah.
started out with me doing that one, and then I thought, the next year I thought, well, I've tried all these new programs now. I've moved to another city now.
Mhm.
Oh, let me say what I've learned about, those programs and the different recovery communities I was a part of because I lived in Oakland and the next year I moved to New York. And then I don't think I thought about doing another one past that. But then the next year I had moved to Philadelphia and the pandemic had started, which did have a lot of impact on the way that I was practicing recovery because I couldn't go in person to meetings. Like there were a lot of things that had to change. And a lot of the things I was working for my own personal program, the things that were building my strength personally as a person in recovery weren't really available. Like I couldn't go dance, I
Mhm.
couldn't go whatever. So I really was like, I that might be interesting for someone to read. I don't know. And at the very least, here's this snapshot of like, I think that's the year I became like, okay, this is going to be somewhere that I chronicle for myself what this
Yeah.
journey has been like because I don't operate under the assumption that I'll always be able to. I don't take it for granted that I'm sober right now or that I'll be sober in the future. Just because I've been sober for like 9 years doesn't mean anything. Life is so hard and so unpredictable. So so that one just kind of grew like that. Like I just every year was like, wow, so much has changed. Let me see. And then the Black non-binary situation, that was a project that got a lot of interest when I first started it, when I first put the feelers out for it. And then I moved a bunch, and then the pandemic happened. And so I had all these people I was meant to go and like visit because I was also talking with a few other people, collaborators who are filmmakers as well, about making a documentary. So I was actually going to
Mhm.
plan visiting people, and things really did have to shift a lot for the pandemic. So but in spite of that, I felt like, especially because I was during the time of the uprisings, I really just felt like I needed for myself to see, to witness other like Black queer like exploration, thriving, safety, art and like creativity and joy in a really serious way. And so even though it was extremely difficult to produce the first anthology of that, it also was something I really felt like I needed to see myself. And I think the continuation of that, it's morphed into an Allied Media project, which runs Allied Media Conference, if you're not familiar with that, for people who are
Mhm.
listening. Um, and so I have another issue. I think I'm transitioning to making those single issues instead of trying to get a huge anthology together anymore. I think beyond that at this point, um, there's just so I could interview. I'm a real serious oral history person. I love oral history,
Yeah.
but I think that I could interview like 10,000 people and they would all say something pretty different because it's very personal.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense for it to not stop as long as I'm able to. I think that's a project I'd like to
Mhm.
keep going. But then sometimes I do something I'm like, I'm done with that.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel
I
like I
just
did
really
it.
go with whatever's interesting to me, if I'm honest. That's really the benefit of
Yeah.
what I do is that, and I think the zine world in general, is that you have people, because you're not going to get famous, you're not going to make a ton of money, you're not going to get rich and buy two homes, like, so you just have to care about it. I think
Yeah.
you're going to do it.
Are there any topics, I'm sure you've got things in the works, but are there any topics that you either haven't found the right way to approach it yet, or like things haven't lined up yet, but topics you really are interested in exploring or making collections about?
Yeah,
I'm sure
I
there
actually have a
are.
big page of ideas. I really wanted to, I forgot what I was going to call it, but I really wanted to have this zine series that literally would take something that's common that I use. So, like, I don't know, maybe a product that I use or something like that, and then
Mhm.
go through and list every single one of the ingredients and then go through and say what those ingredients are. And the zine is just that. And then me talking about
That.
relationship with that thing.
Yeah.
Because I rarely know what all the things are on the labels of the things that
Oh, yeah.
especially about food. I'm just like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And I'd kind of like to know.
Yeah.
Um, and I would be interested in reading that. And then I also, gosh, there's one thing I've been working on for maybe a year or two now. And well, two things. One is a resource recovery resource mapper, which just like is a way for people to think about in a strengths-based way what are the resources they already have in their life to support them in trying to heal, whether that be like friendships or relationships, or what are the things that really bring them like joy in their life, where do they feel safe, and really mapping those things out so that they can make a plan for supporting themselves on their path. That one is just kind of taking one time because inspiration has been like really ebbing and flowing during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's just dragging on forever. But then there is one called that I was working on called the End of Relationships, and it's a workbook that basically is looking at how to how to frame the end of relationships, the end of work relationships, and the friendships and the romantic
Hmm.
relationships, and how to support yourself through that transition. But it's such a huge topic that I just like go back to it and try and work on it and work on it more. But it's vast. Like the more I try to put in, the more I'm like, ooh, I don't want to leave anything out, but it's
Yeah.
hard to think about what would be helpful to people, you know?
Well, and that I wanted to ask you too about not the difference between, but how you move between realizing that a zine is something that might be more of an oral history versus some of the more workbook type of zines that you've put out, which I love. One of my favorites is the So Glad You're Here, the birthday one. Um, and also the May I, the tradable for tradable checklist zine for steamy consensual times.
Yeah.
um, so and those ones are so simple, but there's something like so joyous about maybe it's my like Virgo rising that I'm like, yay, homework.
Mhm.
Where I'm like, give me something to do, where you can like fill it out and it's got such a like a gentleness and community to it where it's something that you made and it's for other people, but then someone else gets to fill it out and add something to it and then give it to someone else too. There's such like a circular community aspect to that. So I wanted to see how you feel about like creating those workbook type zines in comparison to the oral histories or telling stories.
Yeah, I think the workbooks are really dear to my heart in some way because I personally like workbooks a lot.
Hmm.
I relish opportunities to kind of reflect on things in a way that's strengths based, in a way that's non-shaming, non-judgmental, and in a way that I think, in a lot of ways, when I started making zines, it occurred to me, I remember at some point that I could make something like that. I could make a workbook, and I was like, "Oh wow, I can! I can do whatever I want!" Right? And so I think, as someone who does like workbooks, and I buy, I own a bunch of trade back workbooks like that you get from like a store, big perfectly bound.
Hmm.
So often, I think as like a black person, as a trans person, and as in different ways, I just feel like the address is really not to someone like me. The address is to client zero, who I think is assumed is white, is assumed is middle class. There's a lot of assumptions you could tell just from the address in a lot of these workbooks.
Hmm.
And I felt like, well, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? I don't, when I do this, what I want to do is make sure that it feels really accessible to many, many, many different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And that many different people feel like seen and thought about, and um, like in none of these workbooks that I would buy, would they be like, assume that someone could be trans or assume that someone is like disabled, or it's just like the assumption is very, it's supposed to be in their attempt to make it as mainstream as possible. They alienate all these people
Yes, so many
from
people.
the thing
Yeah.
that everybody deserves to have a chance to reflect on. So it was really empowering to me and exciting. It still is very much so, to be able to think about tools that would be helpful to me and then broaden the scope of who else can possibly benefit. And so that's when I think of something that I want to particularly think about healing from, or that I'm like, man, I'm really stuck about this. I wonder how I could think about this. That's usually where we're coming from for me. But then the oral history stuff is really fun because um, besides that's a different level of like research and then like contacting people and organizing how to, what's the best way to meet up with them, and then
Mhm.
usually beforehand, and then doing the actual thing, and then you know um, it's a lot more of that kind of stuff. But then the actual zine is just talking to people, which I love to do.
Yeah.
Like the Making Your Mark tattoo artists who were able to participate in that. That was really lovely. And that was my first time ever doing anything like that. I just thought, I got a tattoo and I thought, what the fuck? This is a terrible experience. The men in the shop was so cruel and just like not, they were the jokes they're making were terribly like racist and anti-black, and there were a lot of misogynist things that people were saying, and I just thought, Jesus, if I worked in this industry, what would that be like? And then I was like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
ask some people, because maybe that was just my experience.
Yeah.
And so usually, there are people that I want to interview about something, then that will become part of the oral history kind of path. But if it's something that I think um, many people could benefit from having a chance to reflect on and being seen in a particular kind of way, because I think there's a healing in that as well. That's usually where I go with the workbooks. Yeah, but there's always certainly definitely kind of like a feeling of every time I do a workbook, I'm always kind of like, who the fuck are you? Who are
Mhm.
you to do something like that? But I'm kind of like, who am I not? Why not?
Yeah.
I'm not forcing anybody
No.
to engage with it. If they want it, then, and if I
Yeah.
do it and people give me feedback that's like, and I welcome that. I'm like, please tell me something, I missed something or what, how it landed. Then I'll stop doing it. I won't release it, I'll take it off.
Yeah.
But that hasn't happened. But I definitely, every time I'm like, oh my God, what are you
Well,
doing? You know?
yeah, and most people aren't really interested in well, people who are angry are not really interested in constructive feedback. They're just yelling into the void because they're angry about other things. But I
Mhm.
love that I think probably all of your zines have there's a note either in the beginning or the end that says like reach out, tell me like if this is something that you liked, if there's something in here that didn't resonate with your experience and you think it could be a little different. There's always that open line of communication to make these stories as universal as possible for people to connect with or people to enjoy and be able to use in a constructive way. And I think that's so important. And the people who want to, like you said, no one has to pick it up, but those people are hilarious to me that pick something up and are like, no, I'm gonna I'm gonna yell about it now.
Yeah.
Like, why?
When I first started doing those recovery zines, I got in so many serious fights with people. People were very upset that they felt like I was really criticizing AA. They felt like I was really, and I was, but I wasn't doing it. I didn't say, oh, well, don't, it doesn't work for anybody and it should be demolished. I just,
No.
well, this is my experience. But for a long time, there was the first two or three I did, it was just like very serious. Like people would threaten me, they would write me very ugly emails and just stuff like that. And it's like, I'm not making you buy it. I'm not, this is just my
No.
opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, those people are a minority compared to most of the really kind, um,
Yeah.
supportive people I meet through my work.
And then I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the design of all of your different projects because there's a lot of collage, like the way that colors are used, and also you created your own font for a lot of them, and use your own writing and things like that. So just the design process of going from a cover mock-up with blank pages to
Mhm.
whether or not the design for something kind of comes along. Obviously the idea will come first, but do you kind of build them at the same time? This is what I want these to look at. The way the non-binary in our own voices was more of like a bound book
Mhm.
versus like a stapled zine,
Mhm.
um, and different things like that. How do you work through that process as it comes?
I have a really heavy duty Rapesco stapler that uses like archival like steel staples. Yeah, steel staples. And can staple like 30 pages at a time. But if it's any larger than that, then it has to be perfectly bound. So in that way,
Yeah,
the form itself kind of requires
dictates. Yeah.
to make the project stable as a book, so it doesn't just like fall apart. But I actually really love designing covers and doing the layouts, but that's like the part that comes at the very, very, very end. Everything else comes before. I think the getting to physically design the covers is like my dessert at the end of the project. Because most of like 95% of, well, not 95, maybe like 90% of the rest of it is all administrative stuff or
Yeah.
editing or like proofreading or stuff like that. Or yeah, not terribly. It can feel quite tedious actually often. But the deciding how it looks is always a pleasure. And I used to do like um, right before I went to that first Zine Fest, I was teaching myself how to use Photoshop. It was
Hmm.
so awful. But at that time, I was making zines. I would print out the pages and then get them chopped in half because I would make these little half size zines. And then I would go through, before I got them chopped, I had these master pages, like actual pages that I still have archived in my studio. And then I would go through and stamp on them with like hand carved stamps. And then I would take them to a coffee shop, get them to copy them, collate them, and I would chop them in half with a big guillotine and then go through and collate and fold and staple all of them. And that was a terrible way to operate. How I do now is much, much better because then I also, right around that time, taught myself how to use InDesign so that it was just, I could transition almost completely away from having paper originals, which was so perilous. Like
Yeah.
I used several just carrying them around from place to place.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And then I always love to ask people what kind of things, especially since you work in so many different mediums, like what are the things that are filling you up, inspiring you, bringing you joy right now, work that you're seeing, watching, reading, um, anything like that.
Wow. Well, music is like is everything for me. I love music; is such a huge part of my life, and always is bringing me a lot of joy. I'm really into the work of Beverly Glenn Copeland right now. Actually, I don't think that person goes by Beverly Glenn Copeland. Glenn Copeland, if you hear this, I love you so much. Thank you for your work in this world. I really appreciate you. Really into Glenn Copeland, really into this doom metal artist, Lingua Ignota, who makes these amazing records that are about like, she's a survivor. Actually, I don't know that person's pronouns. I'll say they are a survivor. And they always portray this extremely vengeful, almost like sadistic uh, character that's just like out to like want to almost like kill all rapists. I mean, it's just like it's extreme. I like do yoga to it. It's just like I just
Yeah.
love it so much. The new seasons of Ozark just came out. I'm very into that. Um, what else is like really giving me joy? I'm a big gardener, so I feel like I've just been planting and getting in the seed catalogs from like
Uh-huh.
True Love and Southern Exposure and Baker. Um, is that kind of what you were talking about?
Yeah. No, anything. Anything and everything.
Anything? I'm also super into getting into ceramics right now, into wheel throwing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How's that going?
really good for the most part, mostly because I just am trying to put any pressure on myself to try to be super great, right? Just
Yeah.
to make gifts for my friends and little things for myself, and it's quite meditative. And I'm
Mhm.
loving that. Um, yeah, I mean, those are the things off top that I feel like I really, and making my friends care packages. I've been really into that lately, and I have a steam room in my apartment, and so I just steam like all the time, which also
Yes. Oh my gosh, so jealous.
yeah,
We
and I
all
just
need
got a
that.
tattoo gun too, which I know is out of control. But
No, it's not. No, it's not. Yay! Oh man.
I'm just gonna tattoo myself, but I'm very excited about that.
That will be so fun. I have a friend who recently did that. Well, not super recently, but maybe a year or so ago. And now they're just telling me, they're like, okay, come visit because I will. I'm like, just you can fill in all my blank spaces, please.
Oh,
No, that's so fun. I am so excited to see all of the wonderful things that are coming our way from you and Diaspora and Savant Press. For all of our listeners and locals to Skylight Books, we've got a stock of golden zines in store, and you can always order from their Etsy shop. Yes,
yeah.
for Diaspora and Savant Press titles. And thank
Also,
you.
if Etsy is listening to this, I hate you. But go ahead, please.
That too. Yeah. Sorry, Etsy. Thank you for selling my things, but no, thank you.
True. Ah,
You don't have to support Etsy. You can buy them online from Skylight Books too, probably. We'll make sure they're
and
on our Shopify.
also, too, you can always get my work from Brown Recluse Zine Distro. Shout out Brown Recluse. If you also don't want to deal with Etsy.
And I think they're on Printed Matter too. There's some
Yeah,
on Printed Matter.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, bye Etsy, we don't need you. And so again, for all of our listeners, my guest today was Golden Collier, and we were so excited to chat about all things Diaspora and Savant Press. And thank you for listening, and we hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.